Hello, I'm Sora Luxon, and this is Magic Lesson number 103, Vibrating Godnames. I'm not going to speak to anyone's specific perception of what's happening inside of Ritual Circle. As you all know, you shouldn't involve others in your magic. And it's also such a unique perspective of experience. I don't know that anyone sharing what's happening for them, for example, if I were to share what's going on for me in a very personal way, don't know that that would be vastly beneficial to anyone. So rather, I'll speak to the broader subject in general terms. So in Hermetic Western formalized traditions, we vibrate God names. Now, that isn't to say that the vibrational technique, that tool passed down from ancient mystery schools, isn't within many different traditions. It absolutely is. You find it in mantric traditions, for example. So just be aware of that. It's just when we talk about calling on angels in Hermetic magic, we're specifying that to our brand, our version, the way we approach the spiritual, the mystical, the magical experience. So it doesn't mean that the same technique and the same tools aren't used in other ways and other traditions to very great effect. They absolutely are. One of the things Vibrating the God Names does is it begins working out the kinks in our physical bodies, in our spiritual body, in the bridge between our two, in that consciousness state, in that mentalism. It actually affects all the planes, which is one of the things that makes it so powerful, and it works despite ourselves. So that's one of the reasons you'll see the vibration of God names very early on in magic, no matter the tradition. Say you're coming from Buddhism and you're being taught mantras very early on. You're coming from a Hermetic background, you're being taught vibrating God names very early on, and to repeat this in a ritualistic way. It helps despite ourselves. Even when we're standing in our own way very early on, the vibration itself is so powerful that it will actually work out the dross. Like in alchemy, we talk about the dross, kind of the denser, maybe bits and pieces of rougher edged things that don't need to be in the refined material, that we're dissolving that out, or that we're vibrating that to the surface for ejection, right? So that it can be expelled. So if you've ever sifted a bowl of fine sand, I feel like everyone has had this experience or one likened to it somewhere in their childhood where they were still standing in awe of harmonic elemental principles, which we often let go of in what we call our temporal maturity. But when you'd be amazed when you'd shake the finer particulates, fine sand, say, in a bucket or a bowl, and then watch the larger or lighter pieces of things rise to the surface, say bits of broken shell or oceanic rock or bits of sea glass, and they'd separate themselves out from the finer sand. Same idea with vibrating the God names. We're retaining the refined essence and separating out the dross. So vibrating the God names does that in a very real way. Again, within our physical bodies, our physical state, and not just the material self, but also within the light body and that mental bridge between both, so that those things can be dissolved or expelled. And in no small part, so it does many things, right? So that's one of the things it does. But it also induces a trance state. Anyone who's worked with mantras will know this. That's the same idea. When we vibrate tones, we can induce trance states, a widening of consciousness that allows for the entrance of, I say the entrance, it's not actually accurate, but for lack of a clearer way to define this, we expand our consciousness in many ways so that heightened energetic signatures can have access to it. Or rather, so in Buddhism, they discuss this almost like the brain is a wheel or the mind is a wheel. And if I'm getting this a little bit wrong, please don't forgive me. It's not my intention in any way to insult or misinterpret this. But that vibrational mantras are the method by which you can kind of spin everything out of the mind. So much like, when you spin a pinwheel and you watch it revolve, but if you spin it even faster and do so consistently enough, it suddenly goes so quickly that it looks like it's completely still, like it's not moving at all. Anyone who understands physics will understand this. Perhaps you're in higher realms of engineering. that there is a point in temporal continuity where if perceptions of things are sped up enough, they will actually, like if frames of movement are sped up enough, you will always reach a point where then it looks as if it's completely still. So same idea with the vibrational mantras or vibrating a God name. When you do it fully or wholly enough, it's almost as if the mind empties. So by use of this technique, this tool, the consciousness can almost become an unconsciousness, very still, emptied out fully, even of the awareness that the God name is being vibrated or that the mantra is being spoken. So completely emptied of even the awareness of the technique in use. And that when that happens, everything is now being thrown or say spun off, if you're talking about that kind of Buddhistic wheel with the spokes, everything being projected out and the mind being completely emptied is almost, that's when then you touch on or can touch on that, I don't want to say higher state because it's not a ladder, but a state of emptied stillness that you are then can be open to, say, more ascendant experiences or the mystical experience, so that you can actually then come into that state where you can touch upon that. Almost like a room that once all the boxes or furniture's out that say, the light ancestral avatar, right, then can actually get through the doorway and enter that empty room to maybe have a dialogue with you. But you have to empty the room out first for that mystical or spiritual experience to even have a place to be existent. So, and by vibrating over time ritualistically, whether you're, say, using a mantra, as I keep discussing in this example, or vibrating a God name, say in Hermetic circle and formal magical practices, when you do it over and over again ritualistically, one of the things you're doing is you're training the mind, you're training the consciousness, and you're training yourself towards, by will, by focus, to enter into those states quickly and purposefully. To have trained the mind by that method, in psychology it'd be called triggering rather than anchoring, right? To trigger an easier and faster entrance, say, into that realm of emptied consciousness, so that a spiritual experience could happen. That's one of the things that's going on when we're vibrating God names. So that's another element to it. And then with further practice and evolution, different frequencies. So what we're doing early on is learning to vibrate at all. Once we've learned to vibrate, we can connect, for lack of a better word. Again, I'll try to be more explicit in a moment, but it's a difficult thing to discuss because you're not actually connecting. They're always there, but there's so many code words to confuse and obfuscate each of our unique perspectives here. So connect with ancestral guardians, with avatars of wisdom and light, with deities, angels, of course, and Hermetic magics, with certain elementals, with group conscious realities that can be tapped into, with our own higher selves that can be corresponded with more clearly inside of a mystical, magical experience. That if you're coming from a Rosicrucian or a Freemasonic background, that master within may be reached for, say, a fuller, more comprehensive dialogue when we're in a trance state, a vibrationally induced a state of higher consciousness. Maybe you hear things in clips and phrases, but you want to sit down and have a 2-hour discussion with the master within. This can be one of those ways to do that. We talk about meditation. This is a form of meditation, but it's an active form of meditation. And it induces many different things. So higher beings, we talk higher, lower, it doesn't really mean anything, but say more ascendant or perhaps more evolved would be another way to think of it, can be connected with. And again, I don't know how you would say this, allowed to give off their divine light, their grace, their divine radiance, their vibrational healing and ascendant frequencies, which, if you're standing in the presence of such, incredible, again, for lack of a better definition, descriptor, it's always an incredible evolutionary catalyst, although it isn't evolution at all. So these are difficult things to talk about in these terms because you're not connecting with, and you're not, when I say that you're then allowing, say, these entities to give off their light, it really is because in a very real way, we're disallowing it most of the time. That's what's actually going on. So it's more a freeing of what already was. And this is where we have these phrases like scales falling from our eyes. Right? We talk about getting a glimpse beyond the veil. So for the divinity presences or those energetic signatures, that's how, say, when we're standing in ritual, that's just how we perceive it to be, as if we're suddenly coming into contact with it or suddenly allowing it access to us. When in fact, that's not what's going on. They're always there. They're always emitting. These energetic signatures are always existent. We're energetic signatures swimming in a sea of pure energies. We just have these blinders, we have the shades pulled down, we have these half-broken goggles in place, or we're missing a contact lens, or we're squinting when we should be wide-eyed. We're looking, half through a broken fractal of a kaleidoscope that's very skewed and warped. Right? That's what's actually going on, and we're letting go of that for, say, a moment. We're letting go of the dross, the inequities, the delusions, the illusions that we are always enforcing on ourselves. So it's not as if we're actually allowing something to come in to contact with us. It's always in contact with us. But so we're always forcing ourselves into these pinpricks of perceptive awareness instead of being aware of this infinite sea of ever shifting, ever evolving, ever harmonizing constant energies that move all around us. That's much closer to the reality. I hope that makes some sense for someone. So in Magick, we talk about the storytelling. We talk about the populist storytelling quite a bit. So the fictional storytelling that gets passed down through the public sphere, often quite inaccurately, holds some hidden gems that are buried beneath the surface, and we're able to pass certain traditions forward for seekers to come find later when they see hints of it, when they see through the layers of, say, mistruth that are added. But say in books or in comics, in contemporary films and movies, perhaps in television shows, when magic is displayed, there's often some kind of an homage to the rumor of every single thing in the universe having a name, having a secret name, a magical name. So every rock, every leaf, every angel. I said universe, not just world, right? Every storm, every teacup, Anything you can imagine having a secret name. And once that secret name is known, the true name, right? Sometimes that's what it's called, or the magical name. That object or thing, whatever, can be fully controlled. That's usually how it's projected in the public sphere, that it has to do with a magician maybe drilling themselves on learning these names and then memorizing them to have control over other things. So, or rather, one could say a magician can fully bring themselves into that other's state of being by possessing the real name of that thing, right? So that they can then become the rock. And this is a little closer to the actual magical implications. They can become the leaf. They can become the eagle. They can become the other person. They can see what they see, hear what they hear. Even more implicitly, have knowledge or correspond with that other, quote unquote, being in a perfect harmonized union. So in a very real way, becoming that other. That once a magician has a thing's true name within their grasp, that they are it whenever they choose to be. So now, that's sort of the public version, right? Think instead of a true name, some hidden name, of its vibration, of whatever that thing is, its energetic signature. So of its name, in another sense, being its vibrational signature. And that once the magician has learned and can correspond with that signature, how, if they can match that vibrational rate, the magician becomes one with that entity, whatever it is. Rock, leaf, bird, column of salt. So that in becoming that signature, what that then would allow for. So especially if one bears in mind, again, that it's not as if you're becoming one with it. What you're actually doing is removing all of the barriers in the way of what already exists, which is a complete connection to it. So that all these states of perceptions of disconnection or otherness, I'm doing my little bunny air quotes that you can't see, that very much in themselves, those things are projected illusions to begin with. And so once the illusion of that separateness dissolves in the right frequency, tone, and vibrational rate, once those vibrations are matched and there is no separation, then yes, the magician very much, now having the secret name of that thing, has access to the state of what is actually real and is that thing, a full merging with anything. All is mind. Sovereignty is a construct of individuated, attenuated awareness. And there is a greater sovereignty in play that we, in our very innocent ignorance, shield ourselves from and shy away from, most especially in our temporal form. And that's that we are, each of us, all of us, also the all. One of the ways to come into awareness and access of that is through techniques like vibrating Godnames. There's a reason in Magick you're asked to become salt, to meditate until you are that thing, right? And then we talk about, names, and it's, if the all is mind and you are now salt, if you're meditating on a column of salt, vibrating at its frequency, tonally vibrating, say you could be vibrating a God name, an angelic name. What are you when you are now in complete correspondence with that thing? What is your name? right? So to speak of something somewhat lesser, there's some big ideas caught up there. I hope I'm hinting at them enough that people, just a guidepost, just a little, here's some paths you can choose to take. So a little more minor subject matter, less scope. Also the idea when we vibrate God names, when we use vibrational techniques, that any influence can be willfully brought into the psychological self. If you're very much into Jungian psychology, and again, just basic common sense and somewhat rationalism, that very much like two wires touching and conducting a charge, that when you come into contact with something psychologically, it has an influence. So it's going to affect both the spiritual and light bodies and the physical body quite a bit. The only difference between what I just said and daily life for many, when we talk about, that any influence can be willfully brought into the psychological self, is the word willfully. So any and all influences, again, this is layman's, right? This is common knowledge. This is common sense. That any and all influences, all too ignored, by the way, very often, brushing on the psyche, do create effects. They do have influence, for better or worse. Things influence us, most assuredly. So when they enter at the level of that all too often untrained, unlocked, wide open, no guard with a sword at the gate, subconscious, which is why we got our subconscious as magicians, and we learn and we train in these things. So the only difference for most people is that most people have or seek no will. There's no willfully inside the sentence in choosing what, where, when, and how of the influences that are having effects on them. So they live all too often not by will, but lack thereof. Again, very important, just a big concept to dwell on a little bit in this magic lesson today. It's choosing to bring things into our the realm of our own psychological influence by will, by intention, is, I hesitate to say 99% of what magic is, but it is incredibly powerful. And that also is an element of vibrating God names. When we talk about the general term and use of that technique, that is one of the things that is going on. The ancients knew that vibration was important. They knew that it's incredibly powerful. That all four elements are a vibration, a frequency of energy. We are a frequency of energy. We are a vibration. Sound, light are vibrations. Sound is a vibration. The spoken word is so incredibly powerful. And how we choose to use it and then amplify it with intention and will and train within it in ways a majority of people don't. It's an incredibly important and incredibly powerful thing. So when we talk about vibrating God names, that's some of what we're talking about as well. We are talking about, in the beginning, there was the word. Right? We are talking about the concept that having a vast of skill with vibrational, magical work can, you can create effects, and not just on what is perceived as the self, but very much what is also the self, which is everything. So, I hope that was helpful to someone. Until next time.